I absolutely love that. And that's such a great point to kind of like end on because I wanted to ask, like, because you're talking about so many other voices and books, like, what were these other books that came out and you were like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, these books are absolutely amazing. Like, they must read. Like, yeah, I want to know what are your titles?
Oh yeah, so I think, back in the 2010s, at the beginning, there was only really Nydia Okorafor that people had, right? We're just like, oh, we got a Nydia Okorafor, or if you wanted to read, Niger voices, you had to go more lit fic, right? And I'm not dogging lit fic, I absolutely love lit fic, right? But I wanted some fantasy, right? And so it wasn't until like 2016, like Children of Blood and Bone just like came on, and all of us, the moment you heard Orisha, you were all like, I'm sorry, open, like what? We're allowed to talk about this? Like this is not like an actual like failed assignment. This isn't a test by my mother to make sure that I know what to say or how to code switch in public. Like this is actually a thing, right? And it wasn't just that. So it was like, news of that book coming out, and then Dave Zuckenborg released David Mogo God Hunter, like a couple of years after that, and that book is a banger. If you haven't read it, absolutely read it. There's news of Skin of the Sea coming out, so it's just like all of a sudden it was like, oh my god. So people are actually asking you what Mummy Water is, like people who literally didn't even want to, you know what I mean? If I said it before, they would have been like, I don't know what that is, but good luck and all that, Godspeed. All of a sudden people are like curious and interested, and it's actually like people are out there like misunderstanding who Shango is or Ogun or all of that, right? But at least they, even if they're misunderstanding, at least they have the lexicon, sort of, right? Which is really, really interesting. To me. So it was sort of like the first time, very recently, actually, just a few years ago, that we could really have these stories out like anywhere. And it's not for a lack of trying, right? I'm not saying that there weren't so many voices that attempted and tried, right? But it was like, sudden first. And even now when we talk about mythology, a lot of times talking about Yoruba mythology, we're not talking about like and the vast range. There's so much, right? But it's a start.
100%. It's something that I always say as well in my videos that like African mythology is not monolithic. Like there is so much, and I still have so many questions even about Mami Wata because I remember the other day I had someone from my country, I'm from Guinea in West Africa, and I had someone mention Mami Wata, and I was like, we have Mami Wata in Guinea? Like, so it's kind of like it evolves and like takes like different shapes of like from
Absolutely.
country to country in the continent. So it's just like super interesting to see that. But talking about myths, like, are there any like myths or legends or creatures even that you really wanted to put in the book, but you had to like leave it out?
Okay, so before I really get to that, I'll say that the thing that people kind of forget is like we didn't have borders, right? Before colonization, we didn't have borders, and so there's a lot of movement, right? And that's what I mean too when we talk about like African countries and histories, is when I talk about like multiracial families or multi-ethnicity, people are just sort of like, I'm sorry, what? Like, aren't you all like this or so on and so forth? And I'm sort of like, well, it's because we had such, people moved with trade, right? People like moved all the time, like, where's the fertile area, where's your family at, so on and so forth. But as you move, your myths too, they travel along with you and they're shaped and they change, right? And so, some people will say like, oh, we have Eloko in Congo and they have Eloko in Nigeria too, right? And so it's not weird that you're talking about Mami Water in Guinea and Mami Water in Nigeria, and it could be that they're different or that they're similar, but there's still, it doesn't make it any less your myth. So I think really with Forged by Blood, I really tried to, as much as there are so many things I wanted to put in, and some I had to hold back. Um, and I wrote those things back in book two. Book two comes out in September. So I think really for me the biggest things I wanted was I wanted people to get to see some of the spirits. And you don't really get that in book one. In book one, you get like the tree spirits, you get the Oloko, you got the Aziza. That was like my big one of like they better not like they better not fight me on this because you're gonna get the Aziza in full form, right? Um, so in book two, I really wanted to flex and I really wanted to show people like what's the spirit court like, what's the spirit realm like what you know these are just some of the ways that we talk about certain things, right? There's one creature that I sort of talk about a little bit in book 2, but I don't really get to fully delve into, and it's something it's somewhat of a sacred creature that um the idea is if you see it, it bestows a blessing on you. It's called a shuku shuku, and it bestows a blessing on you. And if you anybody who eats it, it's like a curse. So if you eat it, anything that has touched its skin or its flesh, you need to like wash it with ash, and you need to wash all your dishes with ash, right? Because you're not trying to invite a curse into your house, right? You're also never supposed to eat it, so keep in mind. But part of the reason why people know what to do is it's if you, and this also speaks to, like I say, like the lot of diversity, right? Is if you, for example, you don't know the myth, but your neighbor knows the myth, right? And you end up eating it, then your neighbor would tell you things like, oh, you need to wash all your dishes with ash and things like that. But anyway, yeah, so lots of creatures. I'm really excited. Even if they didn't end up in book 1, we'll see some of them in book 2 and in my other works.
If you enjoyed that clip, make sure you head over to www.bookupapp.com to download our app so you can connect with your favorite bookish content creators, start conversations, and start your own book club.